I definitely think that being rebellious is a part of life, but if you really want to be a rebel, then you question everything that comes up to you and not go out and try to fight it, but try to understand it and learn it. And that's really how you can understand it, consciously make the right decision to question it the right way.
On July the 20th, 2017, the universe lost one of its brightest stars. Chester Bennington didn't have an easy childhood, but he did have talent. He was passionate about music, he was intelligent, and he made the people around him smile. From an early age, he was destined to become a star. His dream started in high school, and he would bring hope to millions of lost souls around the world after he joined the hugely successful nu metal band Linkin Park. And this is their story.
I don't know if anybody out there can relate, but like, I have a hard time with life. Right. Sometimes it's great, but a lot of times for me, it's really hard. And no matter how I'm feeling, like, I always find myself like struggling with certain patterns of behavior. I find myself like stuck in like the same thing that keeps repeating over and over again. And I'm just like, how am I in this?
Chester Charles Bennington was born on March the 20th, 1976 in Phoenix, Arizona. Although he was raised by two loving parents during his early years, his father, Lee Bennington, a police officer, and his mother, Susan, Chester had an extremely difficult childhood. He experienced things that would traumatize most people for life. When he was just 7 years old, he was a victim of abuse, but he was afraid to tell anyone or even ask for help. This trauma alone would have been enough to affect Chester for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, it wasn't the only childhood trauma he would experience.
Conscious awareness of that thing, and like when you can step back and look at something, like you're actually elevating yourself consciously. You're enlightened at that point, right? To a certain degree. And so this is that moment of enlightenment where you go, you know, I could do something about this, and by doing it, I can move forward and get unstuck from this. And then for me, it's like I can live with life on life's terms. Like I can experience the whole spectrum of humanity and not want to get out of it, whether it's happiness, sadness, or whatever. Like I just want to, when I'm in it, I just want to get out of however I'm feeling, no matter what it is.
When Chester was just 11 years old, he would also have to watch his parents go through a messy divorce, which left Chester feeling abandoned by his mother as he went to live with his father. Chester's childhood abuse spanned several years, from the age of 7 until he was 13, when he eventually told his father what was happening. Like most teenagers affected by trauma, Chester tried to find an escape from the nightmarish world he saw unfolding around him. He once said, "I was getting beaten up and being forced to do things I didn't want to do. It destroyed my self-confidence."
For me, when I'm inside myself, when I'm in my own head, this place right here, this skull between my ears, that is a bad neighborhood. It's crazy in here. This is a bad place for me to be by myself.
Chester hadn't yet discovered how to release his anger and emotions through music, so instead he turned to substance abuse to try and escape the pain and memories of his childhood. By the time Chester had hit his teen years, he'd already started to take opium, weed, and amphetamines, as well as drinking so heavily he'd lose control of his body. This was an incredibly dark time for him. But
like a video drone, Deftones.
Maybe Limp Bizkit again?
Yeah.
Little did Linkin Park know they would help to spearhead an entirely new genre of music. Since the invention of metal in the late 60s with Black Sabbath, there have been several interpretations and reinventions of the metal genre. During the 1970s, we saw the arrival of the new wave of British heavy metal bands that included Iron Maiden, Def Leppard, and Judas Priest. Whilst the 80s continued the evolution of metal with bands such as Motley Crue, Poison, and Whitesnake, as well as heavier acts such as Slayer, metal became saturated across the airwaves and fans wanted something new.
when you listen to our album, Hybrid Theory, you'll definitely hear that we have unique influences, and I don't think you've really heard anything quite like what we're doing.
Although the 90s were heavily dominated by grunge, a movement that was seen to wipe out the 80s glam metal movement, there was something much darker brewing in the underground music scene. A movement that would change the course of metal music to come. That movement was nu metal. Although Linkin Park played a big part in the success of nu metal, there are two bands that are generally considered to be the founders of the iconic genre: Korn and Limp Bizkit.
I want an appetizer. Can you give me some cheese sticks? Hey, is that turkey sandwich? Can I get double cheese?
These artists formed in 1993 and 1994 respectively, with Korn being from Bakersfield, California, and Limp Bizkit residing in Jacksonville, Florida.
It's just one of those days!
They were essentially responsible for not only a new genre of music, but an entirely new subculture that would dominate the early millennium. A subculture that would ultimately be Linkin Park's gateway to success.
We actually have a street team that we run of about 1,000 kids across the country that just are diehard Linkin Park supporters.
Although other bands such as Slipknot and Deftones were also considered to be founders of nu metal, it all started with the self-titled debut studio album released by Korn on October the 11th, 1994. Nu metal had basically taken aspects of every dominant genre from the last 50 years, which included rock and metal, rap, 80s electronica, and even DJ-style sampling and scratching, and combined them all together.
If you like The Roots, you'll like Linkin Park. If you like Slipknot, you'll like Linkin Park. And if you like Depeche Mode, you'll probably like Linkin Park.
Nu metal also brought with it a new variation of anger. Whilst previous genres had come across as aggressive and angry, nu metal expressed a more nihilistic approach to anger, something Linkin Park fans very much recognized in Chester Bennington's lyrics. Lyrically, nu metal dealt with bullying, emotional issues, abandonment, and alienation. These were all issues that resonated with a new generation of music fans in the late 90s and early 2000s. These are also issues that would haunt Chester throughout most of his life. This is a very young Chester Bennington singing Polly by Nirvana. He would have been around 15 years old. High school is where Chester would start his journey to becoming a professional musician. And in 1993, his first band would release a demo cassette. Chester got together with a friend that could play guitar, and they started to learn songs by the Doors. Chester would also listen to groups such as Depeche Mode, The Cure, and The Misfits. Eventually, Chester's musical talent caught the interest of some other young musicians who invited him to a vocal audition.
That was like right at the peak of my musical inspiration. You know, the best show I've ever been to was I went and saw Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and Red Hot Chili Peppers playing, in my opinion, respectively their best records. And Nevermind happened to be the record that Nirvana was touring. Blood Sugar Sex Magic was what Chili Peppers were touring, and 10 was what Pearl Jam was touring. And it was amazing. They were so different. I think that, you know, Nirvana really helped shape kind of how I viewed music. And there's so many aspects of all of their albums that kind of have influenced me. So yeah, there's just so much about Nirvana that has shaped me.
The audition would be for a band called Sean Dowdle and His Friends, where Chester would perform a cover of Pearl Jam's Alive. As soon as the band heard Chester sing, they offered him the gig, and so Chester had his first real chance at following his dream of becoming a rock star. In 1993, the band would release a 3-track demo cassette limited to just 200 copies. Although the band did start to get a following and played over 50 gigs in the Phoenix area, Chester was kicked out as he fell back into substance abuse. The band called it quits shortly after. Grey Days would be Chester's next musical adventure, and this is some of the earliest known live footage of Chester playing with this band. Although Grey Days did show more promise for Chester following his dreams, releasing 2 albums between 1993 and 1997, unfortunately, Grey Days would also call it quits in 1998. Whilst Grey Days didn't land Chester a rock star lifestyle, it did give him a great deal of experience as a musician on the road and working in a studio recording material. Experience that would put him in the path of Linkin Park.
Everybody please say hello to Brad and Mike from Linkin Park. Yeah!
In 1996, 2 high school friends decided they wanted to form a band, but not just any band. This band would be founded on the principle of creating music that was unlike anything anyone had ever heard before. Mike Shinoda and Brad Delson, both born in 1977, who both attended the same high school, Agora High School in Agora Hills. This is where the two would become friends and discover each other's love for music. When Shinoda was just 3 or 4 years old, his mother encouraged him to take up classical piano lessons. By the age of 13, he discovered jazz, blues, and eventually hip-hop.
I think the first experiences that I had with music as far as playing it would have to be when I was really young, when I was about 3 or 4. My mom enrolled me in a piano class. It was like a Yamaha piano workshop type of thing for young kids, and we'd just go in with a class of 10 or 15 other kids of all ages who were just learning piano for the first time. And they teach you how to put your hands on the keys correctly, sit correctly, and all those things. And it kind of stuck.
Whilst Brad, on the other hand, was a guitarist at heart, citing influences from Guns N' Roses to Sebastian Bach of Skid Row and even Deftones. However, Brad has never really taken interviews seriously, so Sebastian Bach might not be such a huge influence.
Is Sebastian Bach the reason you got into music?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is safe to say, though, that Delson was heavily influenced by rock and metal music, which can be heard throughout Linkin Park's entire discography. Linkin Park, however, would not be the name of Shinoda and Delson's band to begin with. The pair would form a group called Zero, spelt with an X, and recruited Rob Borden as their drummer, who had also been in a band with Delson previously. This is said to be the official formation of Linkin Park, just with a different name. Zero would record a 4-track demo tape and in 1997 would end up playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go in West Hollywood, opening for System of a Down. Despite Shinoda thinking Zero sounded awful that night, it would be one of the most important gigs in Linkin Park's history. On that night, Zero were offered a development deal, and development deals often lead to major label signings. This would be the true birth of Linkin Park. Linkin Park was still missing some vital ingredients for their mix of music. 1, the actual name Linkin Park, and 2, Chester Bennington.
I remember being fairly young, and we were playing. My brother and my sisters were in the car. We were playing a game where we were deciding on, telling everyone what we were going to be when we grew up. And I said I wanted to be a rock star. It was just really funny because everybody kind of looked at me like I was crazy, it was cute because they were being serious about what they wanted to be, and I was being serious too. I mean, I always remember being drawn to music in a way that I just felt compelled to sing. I felt compelled to feel the music in a way that was important.
In 1999, Zero were on the lookout for a new vocalist, and Chester was also looking for a new band. Chester's old A&R guy, Scott Harrington, had heard of an up-and-coming band from Los Angeles he thought Chester might be interested in. Harrington decided to give Chester a call to tell him about the band, and after a brief conversation, Chester said he was interested. Zero sent Chester a demo tape, and after hearing the tape, Chester was hooked. Chester was supposed to be attending his own 23rd birthday party, but instead immediately went into the studio to lay down some vocals. A few days later, after Zero heard the tracks, they invited Chester for an audition in Los Angeles.
It was like the most random possible situation. From my perspective, almost 23 at the time, when I got a call from Scott Harrington, who represented the band that I had been in, I actually quit music. I was gonna become like a desk person and sell something. So I got this phone call randomly out of nowhere from Scott after years of not really talking to him. And then he told me about these kids from California who were creating something really special that sounded different and that really had potential in his opinion, and they needed a singer, and the first person he thought of was me. I kind of laughed and I said, screw it. I'll take a listen to it. I listened to it. It was great. And within a few days, I was in California. And
Chester felt he had a huge opportunity, but not only did he have a job in Arizona, he also had a wife and a child of his own. But this was his dream. He knew he may never be offered this type of opportunity again. He had to risk everything. Before he knew it, he found himself in Zero's rehearsal space auditioning for the part of vocalist. Not only were the band blown away, but another vocalist walked in after Chester's audition and said, "If you guys don't pick this guy, you're crazy." Chester had to sit and watch other vocalists audition for what he felt was already his part in the band. He almost walked away and headed back to Arizona. But as we all know, Chester landed the gig. He was offered the part in the band and instantly moved his family to California, where Zero would reinvent themselves as Hybrid Theory. And although everything seemed to be falling into place, the real struggle was only just beginning.
Through our own experiences, we share similar ties to everyone else's experience, and I think that people can naturally then find their own story in our songs. Rather than teaching somebody anything or having a message, really it's more of finding a common ground and finding a connection in our own stories, not only within the band, but also with our fans and people who are listening to our music.
After briefly being called Hybrid Theory, the band decided to change their name again in the early part of the year 2000 to Linkin Park, in the hopes of finally landing a record deal. Since forming in 1996, Linkin Park had essentially started to write their debut record, which would eventually become Hybrid Theory. However, the year 2000 would almost be the end of the band before they'd even begun. Linkin Park would now spend every single second they could getting in touch with record labels and inviting A&R executives to their small shows. However, they were being rejected again and again. Record labels wanted nothing to do with the band. For Chester, this was becoming increasingly disappointing, and he was once again considering packing up his dream of being a rock star and heading back to Arizona to take his old job. The band would be given one final opportunity at being signed when A&R guy Jeff Blue took up a job at Warner Brothers Records, a label Linkin Park had previously been rejected by several times. Brad had met Jeff whilst he was interning for Zomba, the same label that helped to release a demo by Zero a few years earlier. This was their way into the music industry, and Jeff Blue helped get Linkin Park signed to Warner Brothers Records. Despite landing a dream record deal, shortly after entering the studio, the band was secretly hoping the label would now drop them. The label were trying to take control of Linkin Park's sound and image, trying to get them to adopt silly gimmicks and produce a more mainstream sound.
For us, if you listen to Hybrid Theory, it was intentionally very rigid and segmented. The thing that was special at the time was to make rock and sample-based music smash together in a way, and in doing so, we wanted to make the rock more sample-like. So everything was very cut up and mechanical.
Linkin Park wanted to do things their way. They wanted to dictate their own image and their own sound. Ultimately, they just wanted freedom. And Hybrid Theory gave them freedom on a level they never thought possible. Stars overnight. After being released in October of the year 2000, it sold 50,000 copies in its first week and over 4 million copies in its first year. Hybrid Theory was certified gold just 5 weeks after its release and was also the best-selling album of 2001. And we're not just talking about the best-selling rock album of the year, it was the outright best-selling album of that year. This was all at a time when pop superstars such as Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys were dominating the charts and TV screens of the time. It seemed almost unimaginable that a band like Linkin Park could reach such a height of success.
At the time when Hybrid Theory came out, we were still doing real snail mail mailing lists. Email hadn't caught on yet. But we sent out our samplers, our album samplers with 2 songs on it. We sent those out. Half of them were CD, half were cassette. And the fans got them and passed them around and dubbed them, and everybody made copies, whatever. Like Chester said, there's a lot that has to do with timing. Like, we can't ignore the fact that that was a time when pop, just bubblegum pop, was selling huge, and people like ourselves were sick of it. It's like all you would ever hear when you turn on the radio is like 5 guys or 5 girls dancing, these little dance moves, and we were just like, really? I can't watch another one.
Linkin Park not only became a commercial success overnight, but they became a global phenomenon, appearing on music TV talk shows around the globe, from America to Europe and even Japan.
Wrong answer, Brad.
Oh, that was the last. Sorry, I got confused.
He's not good at this.
Fasten your seatbelts and wear your helmets for the wackiest ride of your life.
Regionale Band, aber nein, Linkin Park is international. So what was before Linkin Park? Yeah, that's quite good.
It was fun, and we also had a chance to work with different camera speeds for the first time.
In 2001, Linkin Park began a world tour, playing with the likes of Deftones in France and Belgium, whilst also being invited to play huge metal festivals such as Rock am Ring in Germany, Blitz Festival in Japan, and even Ozfest with the likes of Black Sabbath and Slipknot.
That motherfucker got respect for my boy right there.
In the space of just a few months, Linkin Park had gone from being rejected by every record label they'd approached to becoming global superstars. The band were also invited to play the Family Values Tour in 2001, a festival that new metal pioneers Korn had launched in 1998, that also showcased Limp Bizkit, Incubus, and Rammstein.
So get ready to rock with MTV Presents, the Family Values Tour 2001.
Not satisfied with being on someone else's tour poster, Linkin Park decided to launch their own festival called Project Revolution the following year. The idea was to bring rock, metal, rap, and hip-hop artists onto one stage. With a debut album selling millions of copies around the world, a Grammy Award for their single Crawling, their own festival, and a string of other accolades such as Best Hard Rock Group, Modern Rock Artist of the Year, and Favorite Breakthrough Artist, Linkin Park were now officially rock superstars. Linkin Park wasted no time heading back into the studio in 2002 to record their second album, Meteora, but this wouldn't just be another record. Mike Shinoda wanted to capture the entire process from studio recording to artwork and even documenting the band's creative process.
We feel like we're just getting started, I know people have put a lot of pressure on the position we're in with the album. We're not, we're young guys and we want to do a lot of different things. So work in progress was kind of the theme that came out of it. That's basically the starting point of this whole piece. It's not about the finished thing, it's about how it gets there. As much as we can do that with this album, show that evolution, we will.
Although Linkin Park had experienced huge success with Hybrid Theory, the band were now under an immense amount of pressure to top their debut album. However, driven by an unrivaled passion for music, the band had already begun writing Meteora on their tour bus during 2001.
This is our studio. This is where we're making the magic happen in the back of the bus.
From April 2002 until December of the same year, Linkin Park would move production of Meteora into Mike Shinoda's home studio. Linkin Park now had not only the financial freedom, but also complete creative freedom to focus on this next record. Whilst the band knew they were pouring their heart and soul into this second album, little did they know Meteora would become one of the biggest selling records of the 21st century. Released on March the 25th, 2003, in its first week alone, Meteora sold over 800,000 copies, landing the band a #1 spot on the American Billboard charts, as well as #1 spots in the UK and several European countries. Meteora even hit number 6 in the Japanese album charts. Somewhere I Belong and Numb became iconic anthems for the band and helped to secure Linkin Park's reputation as one of the foremost dominant nu metal bands of the era. However, despite this success, it would be Chester Bennington's personal life that would begin to suffer.
This is not a glamorous tale of being a multi-platinum rock star with all this money and all these people doing everything that you want and this fabulous life.
Linkin Park had already proven their worth after the initial success of their debut record Hybrid Theory and the huge success of Meteora. The band seemed to be unstoppable, and they would go on to release another 5 chart-smashing studio albums, including Minutes to Midnight and 1,000 Suns. Chester, however, would yet again be haunted by rejection and abandonment as his marriage with his first wife Samantha started to break down during the early years of Linkin Park. They would eventually divorce in 2005. Lyrically, it appeared that Chester was struggling to deal with the divorce. Valentine's Day, a song featured on the band's 3rd studio album, Minutes to Midnight, seemed to lay bare Chester's deep-rooted anguish at the collapse of his first marriage. My insides all turned to ash and blew away as I collapsed. A black wind took them away from sight and held the darkness over day that night. Although Chester would find the new love of his life in former Playboy model Tillinda Bentley, even this wasn't enough for him to mentally cope with the world around him. Despite achieving his dream of becoming a rock star, Chester continued to spend the majority of his career with Linkin Park, struggling with substance addiction and depression. Eventually, it all became too much for him. During his time in Linkin Park, Chester became close friends with Chris Cornell, founding member of Soundgarden and lead singer of Audioslave. Cornell had experienced a similar upbringing to Chester, which also led Cornell to suffering from severe depression from an early age. Chris Cornell also knew the pain of substance addiction, and this helped Cornell and Bennington to form a natural bond, and they became close friends. Over the years, Chester had sustained several broken bones on tour, some of which required over a year of physical rehabilitation. This also meant that he would be prescribed with prescription medications, something that would become an ongoing battle for his sobriety. Chester also lost some people close to him due to cancer, and on top of this, he was struggling to hold together relationships with his friends, his family, and even his bandmates in Linkin Park. It seemed that his lifelong struggle with depression would hold a grip over him that he could just never let go of.
I was like, depressed, and I was like, drinking again, and then I was like doing all this stuff, and I was just like, dude, like this is crazy. And all my relationships were struggling, like everything was struggling, and it was just really tough. And so there was like just enough things to kind of keep me wanting to go. But yeah, I mean, like you were saying earlier, I don't think it was burnt out from just like, man, like I just need a break. I was burnt out because I was just like, fuck the world. Like, not like I need a break, like honestly, like fuck all of you, everybody and everything, and I don't like doing anything anymore. Like nothing makes me happy. I don't like anyone. I even told one of my therapists at one point, I said, I just don't want to feel anything.
On May the 18th, 2017, Chester's wife had to deliver the devastating news that his best friend Chris Cornell had passed away. Chester wrote a heartbreaking letter to Chris after hearing the news. Thoughts of you flooded my mind and I wept. You have inspired me in so many ways you could never have known. I can't imagine a world without you in it. I pray you find peace in the next life. Your friend, Chester. 2 months later, on the 20th of July 2017, Chester had taken his own life. Linkin Park had touched so many lives, and Chester's memory will forever live on through the music.